She was being forced into a wagon at gunpoint. The cowboy's shot made the man drop his weapon. Clara had always been known in her small town for her bright eyes and the steady courage she carried in her heart. She was not a woman who sought attention, but she moved with a quiet confidence that people noticed. Her hair, the color of autumn wheat, bounced lightly as she walked along the dirt road leading home from her family's farm. The sun was low in the sky, painting the town in warm gold and casting long shadows behind the wooden buildings. It was one of those evenings where everything seemed calm, peaceful, and ordinary, too ordinary as it would soon turn out. As she walked, Clara's mind wandered to the events of the day. She had spent the morning helping her mother prepare a basket of bread for the town market and assisting her younger brother with lessons under the shade of the old oak tree near their house. Though life was simple, it was filled with small joys that made her heart feel full. She loved the quiet chatter of neighbors, the laughter of children playing near the stream, and the feeling of the wind brushing gently against her skin. It was a life many would have been content with, yet Clara's instincts always made her aware of the dangers that could arise at any moment. The town itself was small but bustling with the quiet rhythm of everyday life. Wooden fences lined the streets, horses trotting lazily in their stalls, and a few wagons clattered over the uneven planks of the marketplace. There was a sense of community here. People greeted each other warmly, and familiar faces smiled as they passed one another. But beyond the boundaries of the town, the world was not always as friendly. Bandits and lawless men wandered the outskirts looking for easy prey. It was a constant reminder that even in moments of calm, vigilance was necessary. Clara kept her basket of bread close to her side, the aroma of freshly baked loaves mingling with the dusty scent of the road. She loved how simple things could bring comfort, and today she felt content. But as she walked, she could not shake the feeling that someone was watching her from the shadows beyond the last line of shops. She turned her head subtly, scanning the edge of the road, but saw nothing. Perhaps it was just her imagination, she thought. After all, the town had never experienced anything truly violent in recent memory. Most of the danger stayed in stories people told around evening fires. Yet, even as she told herself it was nothing, her instincts tightened like a string pulled too far. Clara had learned from her father to trust her instincts. They were often stronger than any words of reassurance. There was something in the way the wind shifted that evening, a subtle warning, as if the world itself wanted her to be alert. She picked up her pace slightly, hoping to reach home before darkness fully descended. The road she walked was lined with wildflowers that swayed in the evening breeze, their colors muted in the golden sunlight. Birds chirped softly from the branches overhead, unaware of the tension growing below. Clara's steps were steady, yet each sound, the distant clatter of hooves, the snap of a twig underfoot, made her pulse quicken. She tried to focus on the familiar sights around her. The bakery where Mr. Thompson sold his famous pies, the blacksmith hammering away at glowing metal, and the general store with its shelves lined with jars and sacks of goods. All of it seemed comforting, yet the feeling of being watched persisted. As she approached a small bend in the road, Clara noticed movement from the corner of her eye. A figure crouched near a wagon abandoned by the side of the trail. Her breath caught in her throat. The figure was a man, tall and wiry, with an expression that made her heart skip a beat. There was a certain hardness in his eyes, the kind that spoke of desperation and danger. Clara instinctively clutched her basket tighter, her mind racing for a way to keep herself safe. She knew she had to remain calm. Any sudden move could provoke him. The man stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dirt road. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she measured the distance between them. He did not speak at first, merely watching her with a fixed intensity. She noticed his hand hovering near the holster at his side. Panic threatened to rise, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. She had faced difficult situations before, small ones that tested her courage, and she knew that fear could only help her if she learned to control it. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The wind rustled the leaves, and the distant sound of a horse's hooves echoed faintly in the distance. Clara's mind raced, calculating her options. Could she run? There was no one nearby to help her, and the man's movements were quick and deliberate. Could she appeal to him with words? She had seen in stories how some women managed to calm dangerous men with reason and charm, but this felt different. The tension in the air was heavy, almost suffocating. As the man came closer, he spoke in a low, commanding voice, demanding that she move toward the wagon. Clara's pulse surged, and a wave of fear threatened to paralyze her. She glanced around desperately, seeking some sign of help, but the road was empty. The town, the comfort of home, all seemed far away in that moment. She could see the determination in his eyes, the lack of hesitation, the cold resolve. This was no ordinary confrontation. Clara took a small step back, her mind racing for any strategy that might save her. She remembered her father's lessons. Never show complete fear, keep your wits about you, and look for any opportunity to escape. Her eyes flicked toward the horizon, hoping for a glimpse of someone who might intervene. She spotted a figure on horseback in the distance, someone moving quickly along the edge of town, perhaps a passerby. A glimmer of hope warmed her chest, but she knew she could not rely solely on luck. The man's voice cut through the air again, sharper this time. He demanded compliance. Clara's hands shook slightly, but she forced herself to remain calm. Her mind worked frantically, recalling every detail of her surroundings. The wagon he intended to use for her was old and rickety, its wheels worn from years of travel. Perhaps she could use that to her advantage. Perhaps she could find a moment to slip away while he prepared it. She took another careful step backward, her senses heightened to every sound and movement. The sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the road. Clara realized that darkness would soon provide both danger and cover. Her heart ached with tension, and she felt every second stretch endlessly. She reminded herself that panic would be her enemy, that courage, even a quiet, steady courage, might be the only weapon she had. The figure on horseback drew closer, a shape that seemed almost heroic against the golden sunset. Clara's hope surged. Perhaps the danger would not end in tragedy. Perhaps someone would arrive just in time to prevent what she feared most. Her eyes locked on the approaching figure, her mind silently urging him to act quickly, to recognize the peril before it was too late. Meanwhile, the man's patience began to waver. He sensed hesitation in Clara, yet he could not predict the intervention that was about to come. His focus remained on her, his intent clear, his desperation palpable. Clara's heart pounded in rhythm with the pounding of hooves that drew near. The world seemed suspended between ordinary calm and extraordinary danger. Clara stood her ground as best she could, determined not to give in to fear entirely. Every detail around her, the rough texture of the road under her boots, the smell of dust and flowers mingling in the air, the distant cries of children returning home, reminded her of the life she cherished and the stakes of this moment. She knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. As the man reached for the wagon, preparing to force her into it, the figure on horseback finally emerged clearly from the horizon. Clara's breath hitched. The moment she had silently prayed for had arrived. Help was near, and her heart surged with cautious relief. She knew the danger was not yet over, but for the first time since the encounter began, she felt the faintest spark of hope. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, each second stretching like an eternity. Clara's gaze flicked between the man and the approaching rider, analyzing every movement, every intention. Her mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and prayers. She realized that the outcome of this evening would shape her life forever, that her courage in these moments would be tested in ways she had never imagined. And so she waited, poised on the edge of fear and hope, ready to act, to survive, and to see the events unfold that would forever change her life. The world held its breath alongside her, suspended between calm and chaos, as the evening shadows deepened, and the first crucial steps of destiny began to take shape. Clara's heart raced as she realized that the man approaching her was not simply a traveler lost on the road. There was a cold intensity in his eyes, a ruthless determination that made her instincts scream for her to act carefully. The sun was now dipping closer to the horizon, casting the world in deep golden and amber tones, the shadows of trees and buildings stretching like long fingers across the dusty road. Clara's basket of bread felt heavier in her hands, though its weight was nothing compared to the sudden weight of fear pressing against her chest. The man stepped closer, and Clara could hear the scrape of his boots against the gravel. His voice, low and commanding, cut through the evening air. He demanded that she get into the wagon parked just a few steps away, its wheels worn and creaking under the weight of years of travel. The basket of bread, once a symbol of comfort and home, now seemed almost absurd in her hands. a fragile shield against the danger that loomed. She swallowed hard and took a cautious step backward, trying to create a little more space between herself and the man. Every instinct in Clara's body screamed at her to run, to flee before it was too late, but she quickly realized that running might make the situation worse. The man's eyes followed her every move, calculating, measuring, predicting. She could not afford to panic or make a sudden movement that would provoke him. Instead, she focused on breathing steadily, her mind racing to find a solution. She remembered the lessons her father had taught her about reading people, watching their eyes, noticing small hesitations, and looking for opportunities when their attention shifted. The man reached out to grab her arm, and Clara recoiled instinctively. The contact was brief, but it sent a shiver through her entire body. Her pulse was pounding like a drum in her ears. Yet, amidst the fear, a spark of determination ignited inside her. She refused to let herself be cowed completely. Her life, her freedom, and everything she cherished depended on staying alert and ready. She scanned the road quickly, looking for anything, a tree, a rock, or even the wagon itself, that could be used to her advantage if she needed to escape. It was then that she noticed movement in the distance. A figure on horseback was approaching, riding along the edge of the town road. At first, she thought it might be another traveler, unaware of the danger, but something about the rider's posture suggested skill and purpose. Clara's chest tightened with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Could this person see the situation unfolding? Would they understand the urgency? Her eyes flicked back to the man, and she saw that his attention was fully on her. He had not noticed the rider yet, which meant she might have a chance if she could hold out just a little longer. Clara's mind raced. She tried to think of ways to distract the man, to give herself an opening. Perhaps a sudden movement toward the wagon might confuse him, or maybe she could throw something from her basket to make him flinch. Every idea seemed risky, but the alternative, compliance, was even worse. The man's grip on his weapon, now partially visible in the fading light, made it clear that he would not hesitate to use it if she resisted. Clara's fear rose again, but this time it was tempered by a sense of focus. She had to survive, and survival required both courage and cleverness. The man's voice cut through the silence once more, sharper now. "Step into the wagon," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Clara's legs felt like lead, yet she forced herself to take a measured step backward. Each movement had to be precise. Any sudden motion could trigger a dangerous reaction. She kept her eyes on the man's hands, noting how his fingers tightened around the handle of the weapon. Her pulse thumped violently, but she forced herself to breathe slowly, to steady her trembling body. The figure on horseback drew closer, and Clara felt a flicker of relief. She tried to keep her expression as calm as possible, hoping the approaching rider would realize the danger in time. She thought of the stories she had heard about courageous men who intervened in moments of crisis, and she silently prayed that this rider was such a person. The wind picked up slightly, rustling her hair and the edges of the wagon, adding a subtle soundtrack to the tension that gripped the road. The man reached for her again, more insistently this time. Clara felt the panic creeping back, but she resisted the urge to scream or flee recklessly. She knew that the slightest show of uncontrolled fear might trigger violence. Instead, she focused on maintaining eye contact, trying to convey without words that she would not go quietly. Her courage, though trembling, was real. She refused to allow fear to control her completely. She glanced toward the wagon, noting its position and the uneven ground around it. Perhaps she could use it to her advantage if the moment arose. Her mind worked quickly, analyzing the layout of the area, imagining every possible scenario. The man's movements were deliberate but not flawless. If she timed her actions carefully, she might be able to slip away or distract him long enough for help to arrive. The thought of escape fueled her determination. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the road. The rider on horseback was now close enough that the man could see him. Clara's heart leapt. Perhaps this was the turning point she had been hoping for. The man's expression hardened as he noticed the approaching figure, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Clara's hope surged, tempered by the knowledge that danger was still very real. The man's desperation had not vanished. He was still capable of sudden, violent action. Clara shifted her weight slightly, preparing to move if an opportunity presented itself. She noticed that the man's hand tightened on his weapon, and the air seemed to thicken with tension. Every instinct told her that the next few moments could determine the outcome of the encounter. She thought of her family, of the life she wanted to continue living, and of the courage she had mustered to face danger before. This inner resolve became a shield against the rising tide of fear. The rider drew even closer, and Clara could now see the determined set of his jaw and the confident way he guided his horse. There was a calm strength about him, a sense that he was capable of handling whatever came his way. Clara's hope grew, but she knew she could not rely entirely on this stranger. She had to remain alert, ready to act on her own if necessary. The man's attention flicked between her and the approaching rider, and Clara noticed that he hesitated for a brief moment, a moment that could prove crucial. The sun dipped lower, casting deep shadows across the road and highlighting the dust kicked up by the man's boots and the approaching horse. Clara's senses were heightened, every sound amplified. The distant calls of birds, the rustle of leaves, the faint clatter of hooves, all became part of the symphony of tension surrounding her. She focused on controlling her breathing, maintaining her composure, and looking for any chance to seize control of the situation. The man's voice was now a harsh whisper, laced with impatience and frustration. "Get in the wagon," he barked, his tone sharp enough to make her flinch. Clara stood her ground, weighing her options carefully. She knew that resistance might provoke violence, but submission could lead to a worse fate. Her mind raced, analyzing every possible outcome, and she silently prepared herself for whatever came next. As the rider drew near, Clara felt a flicker of optimism. Perhaps the situation was about to change. Perhaps her courage would be rewarded with intervention. She noticed that the man's movements had grown slightly more erratic, his focus divided. The approach of the stranger seemed to unsettle him, introducing doubt into his previously confident demeanor. Clara's heart pounded, but she allowed herself a small spark of hope. The man's grip on his weapon tightened again, and he took a step toward her, signaling that he would not give up easily. Clara felt the tension coiling inside her like a spring ready to release. She knew that she had to remain alert, to act only when the moment was right. Her mind calculated possibilities, from sudden movements to potential distractions, all while keeping her focus on the approaching rider. The rider's presence was now unmistakable, and Clara could see the determination in his eyes. He was aware of the danger, and his posture indicated that he was ready to intervene if necessary. Clara's courage strengthened. She realized that the approaching figure could tip the balance in her favor, but she could not allow herself to rely solely on him. She had to be prepared for any eventuality. The man shifted, preparing to force her into the wagon, his desperation clear. Clara's heart raced faster, but she kept her composure. She reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She steadied her breathing, tightened her grip on the basket, and readied herself for whatever action would be necessary. And then, in that suspended moment of tension, the world seemed to hold its breath. Clara, the man, and the approaching rider were all caught in the delicate balance between fear and hope, danger and salvation. Every second stretched, every heartbeat thundered in her ears, and Clara understood that the choices made in the next moments could change everything. The tension in the air was nearly unbearable. Clara's heart pounded violently in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears like a drum announcing the imminent danger. The man who had cornered her now stood just a few steps away, his hands hovering over the weapon at his side. His eyes, dark and intense, bore into hers, daring her to move. She felt the full weight of his desperation pressing down on her, a suffocating force that made her knees feel weak. And yet beneath the fear there was a spark, a stubborn glimmer of hope that something or someone might intervene before it was too late. From the edge of the road, the figure of the approaching rider came into sharper focus. He was a cowboy, tall and steady, his posture relaxed but purposeful, eyes locked on the man who threatened Clara. His horse moved with grace, the sound of hooves striking the dusty ground rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat that matched Clara's own. She could see the calm determination in his face, a stark contrast to the panic and aggression in the eyes of her captor. Hope surged within her, but she knew the danger was far from over. The man's voice cut through the evening air, sharp and commanding. "Step into the wagon," he barked, the desperation in his tone barely concealed. Clara's body tensed. The wagon sat nearby, old and worn, its wheels creaking slightly in the soft breeze. The idea of being forced into it filled her with dread, but she forced herself to breathe steadily, to think clearly. Panic, she reminded herself, was a luxury she could not afford. As the man took a step toward her, Clara noticed the subtle shift in his stance. He had not yet noticed the cowboy's presence, which gave her a small but critical window. Every instinct screamed at her to seize this moment, to find any opening, any opportunity to escape. She could feel the weight of the basket in her hands, the rough texture of the bread against her palms, grounding her as she prepared for whatever would come next. The cowboy drew closer, and Clara could see the careful precision in his movements. He guided his horse slowly, deliberately, as if measuring the distance, calculating the perfect moment to act. The air seemed to thrum with anticipation, charged with the tension of an impending confrontation. Clara's eyes flicked between the man and the cowboy, her mind racing to predict what might happen. She understood that this could be the moment that determined whether she would be taken or freed. Suddenly, the man made a sudden move toward the wagon, signaling that he intended to force Clara inside immediately. Her breath caught in her throat. Every second now was critical. The cowboy's horse pawed at the ground, ready to spring into action. Clara's heart pounded so loudly she was sure the man could hear it. She clenched her jaw, her fingers tightening around the basket. She had to stay calm, had to trust that help was near, and had to prepare herself to act if the opportunity presented itself. Then it happened. The cowboy raised his arm, the gun in his hand steady despite the distance. Clara's eyes widened as she saw the glint of metal catching the last rays of the setting sun. The man's focus remained on her, but he did not anticipate the skill and precision of the approaching figure. Time seemed to stretch, the moment suspended as if the world itself held its breath. Clara felt a surge of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and hope coursing through her veins. A single shot rang out, loud and sharp, echoing through the quiet town. The sound tore through the air, startling birds from the trees and sending a swirl of dust into the fading light. Clara's heart leapt into her throat. She saw the man's eyes widen in shock and fear as the bullet struck, and in that instant, his hand slipped and the weapon clattered to the ground. The sound of it hitting the dirt was deafening to Clara, though she was more aware of the sudden release of tension that followed. She took a cautious step back, her body trembling from the shock and relief. The cowboy had acted quickly, decisively, saving her from a fate she could scarcely imagine. The man's desperation was replaced by confusion and fear. He stared at the fallen weapon as if seeing it for the first time, realizing that his plan had been thwarted in a single, irreversible moment. Clara's chest heaved as she tried to steady her racing heart. The danger had not vanished entirely, but the scales had shifted in her favor. The cowboy dismounted with practiced ease, his movements fluid and confident. He approached Clara, keeping a steady eye on the man as he moved. His presence was commanding, yet calm, and Clara felt an immediate sense of safety in his proximity. The man, now weaponless, glared at both of them, realizing that resistance was futile. The balance of power had changed completely, and his earlier confidence had crumbled like dry earth underfoot. Clara could barely speak, her throat dry and voice trembling, but she managed a whispered, "Thank you." The cowboy nodded, his expression reassuring. He did not rush to celebrate or gloat. Instead, he focused on keeping the man at bay, guiding Clara toward a safer spot a few steps away from the wagon. Her legs felt weak beneath her, but she moved steadily, trusting the presence of the cowboy and the advantage now in her hands. The man made one last desperate attempt to reach for something, but the cowboy was ready. With a sharp command and a subtle movement of his hand, he ensured that the threat was neutralized. The man froze, realizing that he was completely overpowered despite his previous aggression. Clara's relief grew with each passing second. She had survived, and she could feel the adrenaline slowly giving way to a mixture of exhaustion and profound gratitude. The evening sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road. Clara's gaze flicked around, taking in the world that had seemed so threatening just moments ago. The wagon, the dusty road, the fading light, all of it had been transformed by the sudden and decisive action of the cowboy. The ordinary town that had seemed peaceful and safe was now a backdrop to a dramatic moment that would forever remain in her memory. The cowboy spoke softly to Clara, reassuring her and guiding her to a position where she could catch her breath. His calm presence grounded her, helping to steady the trembling in her body. She realized that bravery came in many forms, not just in facing danger directly, but in having the skill, precision, and courage to act at the right moment. The cowboy embodied all of these qualities, and Clara felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude. As the man on the ground realized that his chances were gone, the first sounds of the town's response began to emerge. People from nearby buildings, having heard the commotion, started to gather, their faces a mix of shock and concern. The sheriff, alerted by the noise of the gunshot, arrived quickly, his presence adding an official authority to the scene. Clara watched as the man was taken into custody, the threat finally contained. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, mingled with awe at the bravery she had witnessed. Clara's mind replayed the events over and over. The fear, the tension, the adrenaline, and then the sudden release when the shot rang out, it all felt surreal. She realized that moments like these could define a lifetime. The encounter had been terrifying, yet it had also revealed the extraordinary courage of another person, someone willing to risk everything to protect a stranger in need. Clara felt a newfound understanding of the fragility of life, the importance of quick thinking, and the value of courage in the face of danger. The cowboy stayed close, ensuring that Clara remained safe as the sheriff dealt with the man. His presence was steady and reassuring, a protective force that allowed her to slowly regain composure. Clara's hands were still shaking, but she could feel the tension in her body easing. She realized that she had learned something vital about herself as well. The strength to stay calm, the ability to remain aware even in fear, and the courage to survive against overwhelming odds. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting the town in deep twilight, Clara looked at the cowboy with gratitude and respect. His actions had saved her life, and in that moment, she felt a deep sense of connection to someone who had risked everything for her safety. The man's threat had been real and terrifying, but it had also highlighted the extraordinary bravery that ordinary people could display in extraordinary circumstances. The road ahead was now quiet, the danger neutralized, but Clara knew that the memory of this moment would remain with her forever. She had faced the worst and survived, thanks to both her own resilience and the courage of another. The town would remember the story for years to come, a tale of fear, hope, and heroism that began on a dusty road with a desperate man and ended with a single decisive shot. Clara's life had changed in an instant, and though she did not yet fully understand all the ways it would shape her future, she felt a quiet strength within her. The evening had tested her in ways she could never have imagined, and she had emerged not only unharmed, but also profoundly aware of the courage and kindness that existed in the world. She knew that the memory of the cowboy's intervention, the sound of the shot, and the relief that followed would stay with her forever, a defining moment in her life. The immediate danger had passed, but Clara's heart was still racing, a lingering echo of the terror she had just faced. Her legs felt weak, her hands trembled, and her breath came in uneven gasps. She leaned slightly against the wagon, trying to steady herself as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The man who had threatened her was now in the custody of the sheriff, his desperate plans thwarted by a single, precise shot from the cowboy who had arrived just in time. Clara could still hear the faint sounds of townspeople gathering, murmuring amongst themselves about the incredible events they had witnessed. Though she was safe, Clara felt a complex swirl of emotions: relief, gratitude, lingering fear, and awe. She realized how quickly life could change, how suddenly ordinary moments could become extraordinary and life-altering. One moment she had been walking home, enjoying the simple pleasures of the evening, and the next, she had been fighting for her life against a desperate and dangerous man. It was a realization both humbling and sobering, a reminder that the world could be both beautiful and frightening in equal measure. The cowboy, whose name Clara would soon learn was Jesse, stayed close by, his calm presence reassuring her as she slowly regained her composure. He had guided her away from the wagon to ensure she was safe from any further threat. His movements were confident but gentle, as if he instinctively understood the delicate balance between protecting someone and overwhelming them with authority. Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude toward him, not just for the bravery he had shown, but for the quiet steadiness that had allowed her to survive such a terrifying ordeal. As the sheriff and his deputies secured the scene, questioning the captured man and taking note of the events, Clara took a moment to absorb her surroundings. The town, once calm and familiar, now seemed charged with energy and curiosity. People had gathered along the edges of the road, whispering and pointing, some with looks of awe, others with concern. Clara noticed the expressions of those who had witnessed even part of the confrontation, faces pale with shock, eyes wide, breaths held in silent tension. She realized that her life had intersected with theirs in a way that would leave a lasting impression, a story that would be told and retold for years to come. Clara thought of her family, her parents and younger brother, and felt a pang of longing. She wanted to return home, to the warmth and safety of familiar surroundings, where she could finally process everything that had just occurred. The thought of seeing her mother's worried face, of hearing her father's comforting words, gave her strength to take the first steps away from the wagon and toward the path that led home. Jesse remained beside her, his horse patiently waiting, his eyes vigilant, scanning the area for any remaining signs of danger. As they walked together, Clara reflected on the events and the courage it had taken to survive. She realized that fear had been a constant companion, but it had not defeated her. Instead, it had sharpened her awareness, forced her to think quickly, and reminded her of the importance of staying calm under pressure. She also understood the value of help, of the bravery of others who risked themselves to protect those in peril. Jesse's timely intervention had not only saved her life, but it had also taught her something profound about human courage and compassion. Clara's mind replayed the moments leading up to the shot, the man's desperation, his aggressive movements, her own attempts to stay calm and find an opening, and finally, the sharp, decisive action that had ended the threat. She thought about the fear she had felt, so raw and consuming, and how quickly it had transformed into relief and gratitude. The experience left her with a deep appreciation for life, for the fragile nature of safety, and for the people willing to take risks for the sake of others. As they reached the outskirts of the town, Clara noticed that the streets were beginning to quiet again. Most townspeople had returned to their homes, carrying the story of the day with them. Yet, for Clara, the memory of the encounter remained vivid, etched in her mind like a photograph she could not erase. She felt changed, more aware of the unpredictable nature of the world, yet strengthened by the knowledge that she had survived and that courage, both her own and that of others, could make a real difference. Jesse spoke quietly, breaking the reflective silence. "You did well," he said, his voice calm but sincere. "You stayed aware, kept your wits, and didn't panic. That made a difference." Clara looked at him, surprised at his words. She had felt terrified, overwhelmed, and unsure in the moment, yet hearing his assessment gave her a sense of validation. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it, to keep thinking, and to remain resilient when circumstances seemed overwhelming. Clara thanked him again, feeling a deep sense of respect and admiration. She learned not only that there were people willing to risk their lives for others, but also that bravery could take many forms. Jesse's courage had been decisive, but her own awareness, composure, and determination had played a role as well. Together, their actions had turned a moment of terror into one of survival and triumph. As they approached her home, Clara could see the lights of the house glowing warmly through the windows. The familiar sight brought comfort and a sense of relief that she had not felt since the ordeal began. She thought about the conversations she would have with her family, the story she would tell, and the lessons she had learned about courage, vigilance, and trust. Every step toward her home reinforced the understanding that life was precious, and that even ordinary moments could be transformed into extraordinary experiences that shaped who she was. When Clara finally entered her home, she was met with the worried yet relieved faces of her parents. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears welling in her eyes, while her father held her hands and whispered words of comfort. Clara's younger brother looked on with wide eyes, absorbing the gravity of the story even before she could explain it fully. In that moment, surrounded by her family, Clara felt the full weight of gratitude and relief. She had survived, and she was home, safe and alive, but forever changed by the events of that evening. Over the next days, the town continued to talk about the incident. Jesse was hailed as a hero, his actions celebrated by townspeople who admired his bravery and skill. Clara, while still processing her own emotions, began to reflect deeply on the experience. She understood that life was unpredictable, that danger could appear without warning, and that courage, whether in the form of action or awareness, was essential. She felt a quiet sense of pride in having faced such a terrifying situation and in having survived it with composure and resilience. The man who had threatened her was taken into custody, ensuring that the town would be safer for a time. Clara observed the proceedings from a distance, aware that justice was being served and that the threat was no longer immediate. Yet, she also recognized that the experience had given her a perspective that could never be undone. She had glimpsed the fragility of safety and the importance of vigilance, courage, and quick thinking. The lessons of that evening would remain with her, shaping her decisions and her outlook on life in the years to come. As life slowly returned to normal, Clara found herself thinking often about Jesse, the cowboy who had intervened at the crucial moment. She realized that his bravery had not only saved her life, but had also left a lasting impression on her understanding of heroism and human kindness. She felt a bond of trust and respect that, though unspoken, was deeply meaningful. Jesse had shown her that courage could appear when least expected, and that ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges when the situation demanded it. Clara also reflected on her own inner strength. She realized that despite the fear and panic, she had remained alert, composed, and aware of her surroundings. She had listened to her instincts, stayed calm in the face of danger, and prepared herself to act if necessary. These qualities, combined with the timely intervention of another, had ensured her survival. The experience taught her that courage was not only about bold actions, but also about mental resilience, awareness, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Over time, Clara shared her story with friends and neighbors, not to seek attention or praise, but to highlight the lessons she had learned. She spoke of the importance of courage, of staying aware, and of the kindness of strangers who could intervene in moments of crisis. Her story became part of the town's collective memory, a reminder that even ordinary days could hold extraordinary challenges, and that survival often depended on both inner strength and the bravery of others. Clara's life continued, but the events of that day remained a defining moment in her memory. She moved with a new awareness, a deeper understanding of human courage, and a renewed appreciation for the fragility and value of life. The encounter had tested her in ways she could never have imagined, but it had also strengthened her, leaving her more resilient, wiser, and more grateful for every moment she lived. Even years later, Clara would recall that evening with vivid clarity. The tension in the air, the fear that had gripped her, the sound of the shot, and the relief that followed. She remembered the calm bravery of Jesse, the decisive action that had saved her life, and the quiet resilience she had discovered within herself. The story became a part of who she was, shaping her outlook on courage, kindness, and the unpredictable nature of life. Clara emerged from the ordeal forever changed. She had faced the darkest moments of fear and uncertainty, yet survived through a combination of her own courage and the timely intervention of another. She carried the lessons forward, applying them to her everyday life and sharing them with those around her. The memory of that fateful evening, the fear, the bravery, the relief, and the gratitude, would remain with her always, a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the extraordinary ways in which courage and kindness can appear when they are needed most.